In the Gun, episode number 80. Man, we are getting there. Longer in the tooth. 80 episodes now in the history of ITG. It's time for our week two pick'em here on your new favorite WVU football podcast. I am Wesley Euler with the best teammates in the business, the runaway beer truck down the sideline, Owen Schmidt, and the signal caller, Jed Drenning. And of course, this episode of ITG, as always, brought to you in part by our friends at BetOnline, your number one source for all of your betting needs. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, football is back, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place all your wagers, including live bets and all your favorite casino and card games available to play right on your phone. So head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Make sure you use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. And speaking of the games starting, Jed, you brought up this interesting point that we were kicking around before we went on air. Before we get to our week one recap and how we did in our picks there, you had an astute observation about WVU and recent-ish history in some of these games that we've played against Colossus teams, you know, like a top 10 Penn State to open the season on Saturday night, like a top 10 Alabama, like we did a few years ago. Maybe some similarities when we played a team like Georgia in the Sugar Bowl as well, too. And just wanted to give you a chance to share that we were kicking around here with the audience.
Yeah, well, what Owen and I talked about, he called me Sunday morning after the game to catch up. We, picked each other's brain. And what I saw were there seemed to be parallels that string all these games against these blue bloods together. In other words, you have to play almost flawless football, not for 30 minutes, but for the balance of 60 minutes. And why? Because they're so rich in talent, they're so deep that you can't afford to blink. They can blink all they want. They blink several times. They don't pay for it every time they blink, but it seems like we do. Case in point, against Penn State, we blinked the fourth or fifth play of the game, whatever it was. And it was a 72-yard touchdown. Bam.
Fourth,
you can't
yeah.
blink. I mean, they're too talented. They're too explosive. They're too dynamic. So it seems like we're able to, so often the script goes, hang around. You get out to a tough, aggressive start and scrape your way through 30 minutes and see how you stand at halftime. And that's kind of what we did at Penn State. But in the second half, they leaned on us and leaned on us and leaned on us and made us blink a few more times. And the next thing you know, it's a 14-point lead and on down the line. Alabama, when we played them in Atlanta in 2014, it felt similar. It was 17-17 by virtue of the kickoff return right at the end of the first half. We've shocked them. It's still a ball game at halftime because it's tied. In the second half, they keep leaning, and eventually you're going to blink. It takes so little for them to say, oh, now we're up 7, now we're up 10, now we're up 14. It's just so, that's why winning these games is so difficult. When Georgia faced Owen and those guys in the Sugar Bowl, we jumped out to that massive 28-0 lead before anybody could settle into their seats. And what ends up happening? Despite leading 28-0 and that massive early lead, even by halftime, you're like, it doesn't feel 28-0 anymore. And with 90 seconds to go in the game, we're basically like, look, we got to find a way to steal this thing, because if we punt to them, we're going to blow that 28-0 lead and lose this game. Again, for 60 minutes, you just blink once or twice, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. I remember thinking in the second half, man, Georgia scored too quick there. They scored too quick there. We're actually this is going to evaporate. And but for Phil Brady and that fake punt that Owen was paving the way for, maybe that would have turned out differently. But the script seems to be, when you're playing these teams, you come out of the gates and punch them in the mouth and keep punching and punching and punching, and then look up at halftime and see where you stand. And in all three of those games, it was still a game. The other night, it was 14-7. Alabama, it was tied. Even in the Sugar Bowl, we still had the lead, even though it had a different vibe to it. But as the game wears on, you just know you can't go 60 minutes playing perfect football. And when you play an imperfect snap against these guys, they're far more inclined to be in position to, bam, make you pay for it. And this game felt like that one. The difference being, Owen, you guys found a way to make just when things were about to prove to be too much, you made that one extra play to bail us out and actually win the game when they started leaning on us and making those plays.
Yeah, and just to go about the Sugar Bowl, I mean, that was such a overwhelming game because you talk about a David versus Goliath. they weren't even mentioning West Virginia. And then obviously Georgia, I mean, a powerhouse program, powerhouse football team, multiple NFL players that come out of that joint every year upon the year. There happened to be Hurricane Katrina, I believe. That's why we were playing. The game got moved from New Orleans to Georgia. Almost seemed like a home game for the Dogs. But yeah, came back, just literally grinded it out. And the magical Phil Brady play at the end of the guts that Rod had to call a dang fake punt at the end of the game. Now I will say that, and then as far as when we were playing Fiesta Bowl, a lot of things went right that game for us. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of turnovers, right? A lot of coughed up fumbles. We had, I believe, a couple of interceptions, and really it was kind of like before halftime, nothing was really going. You know what I mean? We weren't really getting much going on. And then I ended up breaking that little trap to the outside there. And that was kind of like just what sparked us. I don't know if that's really how it worked, but that seemed like that just kind of, that's what we needed to kind of uplift. But that's what happens when you play great teams, and just like we did the other night with Penn State, you got to play sound football. You can't have mental errors, mental mistakes. We had some procedural penalties and those, just those little things that kind of come to bite you in the butt at the end of the game when you need to play perfect. But that's how football goes, man. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, we played those guys at the front end of the season, but I think we're on track as far as what we can do. We have a great situation now to go play Duquesne, fix those little errors, fix those mistakes. It's not a powerhouse we're going right into again. Get you a feel-good win. And not saying that Duquesne's a slouch. I'm just saying we should, with the effort we played with on Saturday, and if we bring that same mentality and clean up a couple things on the back end there, I expect us to win big. And like Wes said, hey, now we're going to play the start of the season against the Pitt Panthers at home.
Season starts September 16th. I mean, the first 2 weeks were just a little preseason action for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, you're right. It's crazy how that works. I did like that kind of that little note there by Jed as well too. But yeah, you can't blink against teams like that. I will say though, again too, like that's the best team you're going to play all season.
Yeah.
And we talked about this in the previous episode. It's really easy to be hyperbolic after week one. You win and you're going undefeated and you're going to the conference championship game and you're going to go to the playoff and all these things. You lose and the sky's falling and the season's already a disaster. We're 0-1. Oh my goodness. And the real kind of, water finding its level is somewhere in between there, right? Over a course of a 12-game season, except for those few teams that do go on and have those magical 11-1, 12-0 type seasons. I'll say this though. Like I forget who it was, but I saw somebody tweet after the fact, after the Penn State game, that like the bad news for WVU is the schedule doesn't get any easier. And I understand the sentiment. Like it's still a very difficult schedule going forward, but it literally does get easier. Like, that's the best team you're going to play all season. So you can look at that both ways. You can look at it and say, well, the schedule doesn't get easier in the sense of you've got Pitt in a couple weeks, and then you've got the whole slate of the Big 12. But the schedule technically does get easier because that's going to be the best team you play all year.
Let me tell you this, Wes. Pitt's Pitt, but even just a couple games after that, because I want to ask you guys a question real quick here before we move forward. But do you feel a little differently about Texas Tech and TCU after last weekend's games?
No.
It's week one. I think they're still dangerous, but I think they have holes.
I think this is just a me thing. I put less stock into week one college football than most people that I know. They have no preseason. It's the transfer portal era. It's different coaching staff. I don't. Baylor went and lost to Texas State, right? That doesn't mean that I think Baylor's going to be a disaster
his
this year.
Power 5 game, throw for 500 yards against them. There is no way I would have told you that was remotely possible. No, with Josh Newton at corner, there is no way I would have told you that was possible.
Crazy things happen in week 1.
It happened, man. I gotta tell you guys something too. I forgot to tell you. Rasheed Marshall got a hold of me, and
respect too.
I talked to Luke Hamilton, their fullback, and it was kind of cool. He was wearing 34, and because of some special teams play, he wore 35. And I just before the game, I kind of told him a tidbit about the significance of that number with the state of West Virginia. But I asked him. We FaceTime, and I said, man, I said, how you feeling? He's like, well, we're we wanted to win. And I said, buddy, I get it. You know what I mean? I said, did you play your heart out? He's like, yeah. He's like, and Blaine sent me a dang picture message. He had bent his face mask, right? So the kid played, you know what I mean? So the kid played his heart out. Along with, I saw the effort was there, but I told him, I said, buddy, you just got to believe. You got to take what you guys took there. And I said, I was also telling Rasheed, I said, I bet you there's a lot of sore butts today in the locker room, because he was like, they just had gotten finished up doing their conditioning or whatnot on Sunday. And I said, yeah, you should. I mean, that's how you should feel every game. I said, you guys take that same energy, that same intensity, clean up some things, go into next week, get healthy, do your thing, get your win, and then go in the pit with that same atmosphere, that same attitude, that same ferociousness. This season will climb for you. You can believe, you can stack them. You can start to stack them now. But I forgot to tell you guys that.
That's good.
I thought that was a cool little.
This was the first time, Owen, I was thinking about this as we did it. First time I ever got to run out of a locker room with Rasheed,
Yeah,
nice.
Which is kind of neat.
Nice.
We've been in each other's lives for so long, but it's the first time in that environment, in that setting, that because he's obviously in there in his new capacity and all that. But what I wanted to ask you guys, I can't believe we haven't hit this yet, and this is midweek already. Quick thoughts before we jump into our picks or recap our picks. There was so much controversy. I know what my thoughts are. At the end of the game, of course, America was very tuned in with the point spread.
Oh yeah, that's right. I can't believe we didn't talk about this on the previous episode. Yeah, that's bad. It's bad hosting duties by me there.
Here's my take on it, okay, and then I want you guys to pitch in as well. I kind of agree with Neil in that it doesn't bother me. I think he's in competition. Look, there's already the D-Bag of the Year award for coaching in Pennsylvania. You're not going to overtake it. All right, we already know who the D-Bag of the Year in Pennsylvania is. Okay. Now,
to be fair, I mean they're like president and vice president. I mean they're in a league. They're in a league of their own. But
Mr. Narduzzi for D-Bag of the Year in Pennsylvania. But first of all, we got to play defense. We got to stop it. Okay, and I almost feel like if I'm coaching, I take a knee. I don't do that, but that doesn't mean you have to. And part of me is almost happy that it gives me one more thing to be pissed off about. It gives me one more thing to be upset over. That you decided, for whatever curious reason, when so many people wouldn't have, to do that. I wouldn't have done it, but I'm not necessarily going to fault you for doing it. Part of me is glad that he did, because now, and people are saying, oh, well, it's, he's trying to win a popularity contest, get into the playoff. No. If you lose to Michigan or lose to Ohio State, nobody's going to look at it and say, well, he did beat West Virginia 38-15 instead of 31-15. Go ahead and put him in. Let's put you over the hump. No, you got to win the games that you choke in and haven't won. Scoring an extra touchdown when the game's decided in the final seconds against West Virginia isn't going to matter. What you need to do if you're James Franklin is stop winning the games you should win, and for the first time in your career, win a couple games you shouldn't. That's going to get you in.
Jed, you're right, but to play devil's advocate with you, we all know how this works. Like, style points do matter in college football. So hypothetical for you here, right? Penn State goes 11-1. They split with Ohio State and Michigan. They win every other game. They go 11-1. And it's the end of the season, and there's 6 teams that are in consideration for those 4 spots. And you guys know how this works. They go over that entire schedule with a fine-tooth comb, and one of those talking heads sits there on the show.
People on the committee about how they do it. They're going to have a conversation. Honestly, Wes, this is based on what Ollie told me when he's on the committee. They're not going to just look at the score and say, well, they beat West Virginia 38-15. No, they'll have a very thorough conversation. Man, that was a tough game, and they punched that extra one in to make it look worse than it actually was. The committee will have that discussion.
They will. But from James Franklin's standpoint, say WVU, we end up having a season, we go 6-6 this year, 5-7, something. Let's say 5-7, same as last year, right? You know, there's going to be somebody sitting there in the committee that's saying, well, Penn State only beat WVU by 15 points and they're not very good. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think there's some merit to 12 weeks from now when they're having these conversations, looking back on it and saying, they beat WVU by 3 touchdowns as opposed to 2 possessions.
The committee will be saying, wait a minute now, they beat WVU by 23, but really, we take deep dives. We know it wasn't that kind of game. Remember what they did at the end of that game? That conversation
still better. Still a 3 touchdown victory better than a 2 touchdown victory. Again, especially if we end up, finishing 10th or 11th in the Big 12 or something like that. Interesting, but I don't hate it because again, you touched on everything. You're allowed to stop them. But that's the nature of in college football, style points matter, and winning a game by 3 touchdowns instead of 2 touchdowns against a Power 5 opponent at the end of the season, that might be something that works in your favor.
When I played ball in Germany, Owen, one of the things that struck me before I played in a game, I attended some games in the German Federation with some teammates and whatnot. And I saw one that was just a completely mismatched game. And it was like 58-7. And the team that was up 58-7 got the ball back with about a minute and a half to go. And it was like on their 25, they started using their timeout. So went in 2-minute O to score to make it 65-7. They drove the field. And I looked at these guys. I'm like, what are they doing? And these Germans looked back at me like, what are you talking about? They're trying to score. I'm like, yeah, but what are they doing? They're like, well, what do you mean? They have the ball. They're trying to, that's what you do. And so it's an American thing to think, hey, you take a knee, and it's almost more impressive to say we could have, but we chose not to. That's almost more impressive because it's almost an act of desperation. We scored 38 because we couldn't possibly under any circumstances score 39. It's almost more impressive to take the high road. But anyway.
No, I hear you there. And plus, we got to remember, he did, with that touchdown, it did cover. So, whatever. I mean, in today's world with all the sports betting, is he getting a little envelope in his mailbox tomorrow? Who knows?
Well, I'm not saying that, but who knows?
But I'm going to say this, Jed. There is a football etiquette that might sound old school. In my opinion, I'm just saying, even at the high school level, we'll have these conversations over the headsets. Hey, should we punch another one in? I'm like, guys, it's over. Let's take the knee and get these guys out of here. What's the point of, hey, what happens if we run one more play and dude blows his knee?
It would almost make more sense to me if it's 1980 and it's people looking at final scores and voting on it. But that we are so far removed from that with these thorough, vetted, in-depth. Okay, how'd they do on first down in that game? How'd they do on second down in that? They know everything about every game. So if it was 30 years ago, that almost makes a little more sense to me with the beauty pageant of who's 1 and who's 2. But we are so far removed from people just looking at scores that, I mean, these guys sit in committee rooms for 3 straight days and hash out every snap that was taken. So it's not 1982. And it's not decided like that anymore. But again, part of me, if you said, Jed, okay, you choose, does Penn State go for it here or not? I would almost choose they do because I like being pissed off about it. In a weird way, I kind of like being pissed off about it.
Well, it's some firepower.
Yeah.
It's just hey, thanks for the salsa to add to the chips. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, and you got to take that, man. I hope the team understands. And that's what happens when you're around competitors. That should piss you off.
Yep.
That should piss you off. And if the defensive coaches aren't saying something about it in the meeting rooms too, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. So whatever. Hey, maybe we're saying at the end of the season, thanks for the salsa. Who knows?
Poor,
maybe.
poor Duquesne might get a little extra dip on their chip this Saturday night.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I will say, I like how the schedule falls much more before we get into how we did last week here real quick. Last year, man, the schedule, and it's funny. I mean, we're talking about this again. Like, obviously, the schedule doesn't do you many favors this year, but last year you had to open in that emotional, charged, close game, heartbreaking loss to Pitt, right? And then you had to come back home and face a Kansas team that was really unknown, and they had played an FCS the week before, and they didn't show anything, and you had showed everything against Pitt, and the C.J. Donaldson, cat was out of the bag, and all these different things. I like how it falls this year more so in the sense of, you got some sore butts, like Owen said, after the Penn State game, but you're not walking into a buzzsaw week 2. You're not walking into a Kansas team that has a bunch of tricks up their sleeve and still hasn't shown their fastball and is a revamped program and has a legit quarterback and all these different things. And it's just kind of waiting.
What we dealt with Kansas, West, was what TCU just got hit with Colorado. You're exactly right.
A little bit. And, boys, what I'm hoping Pitt gets hit with, because they play Cincinnati this weekend. They didn't have to show anything against Wofford, obviously, but it's the first time they've played Cincinnati in a decade. Old school rivalry. Hopefully that's knockdown, drag out, emotional, all those different things. And then you got to, get on a bus 6 days later and get ready to go play the Mountaineers. But it's a good time, I think, to have some sore butts and lick your wounds and take care of business. You can't take Duquesne lightly. You can't take anybody lightly. But take care of your business, get to halftime healthy and with a comfortable lead. And then, as the joke we continue to make, season really starts September 16th against douchebag of the year and those Pitt Panthers. Don't worry, James Franklin, you could have scored 7 touchdowns at the end of that game, buddy, and we still got your back in the fight with Pat Narduzzi. All right, you still got us.
Oh yeah,
still got us on your side for that.
You're still not getting. Right? There's 3 votes right here that you're not going to dislodge.
That's exactly. We are. What do they call it? We're partisan party voters, right? It doesn't matter. The candidates, the candidates, the issues, all that doesn't matter. All right, we're voting Pat Narduzzi for Pennsylvania D-bag of the year every single year, no matter what. We're just checking that box and all red or all blue or all FU, whatever you want to label it.
Oh boy.
This episode of ITG also brought to you apart by our friends at Toothman Ford, folks. We love Toothman. You love Toothman. They take care of the Mountaineers. Make sure you support those who are doing such great work for our student athletes. And we all know cars cost less in Grafton. All right, Jed, before we get to break here, how did we do last week? 1 week in the books, early days here, right? Just kind of like we're talking about with some of these teams, going to be a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs as the season rolls along, but you got to start somewhere. How are we looking after 1 week of results?
Okay, now for quick recap, I pick passing offense of the week, which team throws for the most yards.
Signal caller. Yep.
Owen's
the beer truck rushing.
The points.
I do defense, least amount of points, and Schuyler does offense, most amount of points.
Now, what's your first going to be? Again, you need to get on YouTube and check this out because you're going to see Schuyler's beautiful new graphics as opposed to the graphics I did last year that looked like they came from a kindergarten class project. Okay, so I picked Texas Tech to throw for the most yards in the Big 12 as a team in week 1. Now, remember the scoring system. If you hit it and you get first place, if you're right, that's 7 points. And then you lose points each way down. If you finish in the top 5, you at least score. Well, I'm bringing that up because I barely finished in the top 5. Leading the way in the Big 12 was Cincinnati. You just mentioned Cincinnati, the aforementioned Cincinnati new starter and Emory Jones. They had 438 yards passing as a team. Again, we're doing this as teams, not individuals. Number 2 was Oklahoma against Arkansas State, the Fighting Butch Joneses, 422 yards. We'll get into that here more in a minute. Number 2 was Baylor with 426. Number 3 was Oklahoma with 422, still the top 3 there. Number 4 was Kansas State. Will Howard comes out strong against SEMO in a blowout win, 360 yards. So that means Texas Tech comes in at number 5 on the road in Laramie and a double overtime loss to the Wyoming Cowboys, 338 yards. I was actually listening to the end of this game as Coach Wallace and I were sitting in traffic 2 hours after our game ended. We were still in gridlock listening to the very end of this. So I finished in 5th place, so that means I get 1 point. Owen, your beer truck team of the week last week, you picked Oklahoma against Arkansas State for run for the most yards as a Big 12 team. Here's how it shook out in the Big 12. The top rushing team in the Big 12 last week was Central Florida. Welcome to the Big 12, Central Florida. 389 yards for Gus Malzahn, Herb Hand and company against Kent State. 56-6 they won. Number 2, big drop off, 262 yards, TCU, in a losing effort to Colorado. Number 3, Kansas, 245 rushing yards in a blowout win over Missouri State. Number 4, Cincinnati, 229 yards. I'll tell you what, poor Dean Hood, Eastern Kentucky, an old buddy of ours from Glenville, from the Glenville days. Cincinnati, 66-13 with 229 yards rushing against Eastern Kentucky. Number 5, did I want to make the cutoff? Number 5, the Fighting Wildcats of Kansas State, 228 yards against Southeastern Missouri. Owen, you came in, you were close. Number 6, 220 yards by Oklahoma.
Let me tell you something about that game. 642 yards of total offense. Who would have thought that Oklahoma was going to throw for roughly almost 400 yards?
I agree.
I mean,
so you almost, not only that, but there's a log jam right in front of you. I mean, you had 220 yards with Oklahoma. Number 5 was 228. Number 4 was 229. Number 3 was 245. So close, but 0 points. Now, Schuyler, welcome to the fold. Schuyler's involved in the action. Schuyler predicting the Big 12 offense of the week. Which Big 12 offense will score the most points? He picked Central Florida against Kent State. How did he fare? The highest scoring offense in the Big 12 in week 1, Oklahoma, 73 points against Arkansas State in a 73-0 win. Oh, poor Butch Jones. Did you see him on the sidelines of that game with his player trying to console him? Oh, you feel bad for Butch. The second most points scored by a Big 12 team, Cincinnati, in a 66-13 win against Eastern Kentucky. And number 3, Schuyler comes in with Central Florida at number 3, 56 points. He picked Central Florida. He finishes number 3. Points awarded to Schuyler for his pick, 3 points for his Big 12 offense of the week. And guys, that about wraps it up for the week. That's really all the picks that we had. And so anything else you want to talk about? Oh, wait, there's one more. Okay. There's one more. Okay. I forgot. Sorry, my bad. There is Wes's pick for Big 12 defense of the week. Last week, which defense would allow the fewest points? He picked the Kansas State Wildcats, defending Big 12 champs, and their opener against Southeastern Missouri State. Okay, here's how things went. Number 1, fewest points allowed by a Big 12 defense, a 3-way tie. There were 3 shutouts pitched in the Big 12 this week. One we just mentioned by Oklahoma, 73-0, over the Fighting Butch Joneses of Arkansas State. BYU shut out Sam Houston, 14-0. That's kind of weird. That game had a weird vibe. And the third shutout, Kansas State shutting out Southeastern Missouri, 45-0. So even, it's a 3-way tie. And I thought maybe I should say, hey, biggest point differential is the tiebreaker, so Wes gets second. But no, I was fair. I was like, hey, even if you tie for first, that's still first. So Wes hit it. He was the only one of us to hit it, which means he's awarded the full 7 points. If you hit it and win, you get 7 points. Even if you finish second, it drops to 4 points with our point system. So winning is big, as it should be. Now, this is the first time, because I saw last year's picks, Wes didn't have a shutout last year. This is his first shutout. So
that's it.
Big shutout for Wes. He takes the early lead through week 1. So, guys, that was fun. And Wes, I'm going to toss it back to you for your thoughts. And I want you guys to bounce this back and forth. And you can enjoy and have at it.
Gentlemen, I mean, there's a famous story. I believe it was the 1984 NBA All-Star game. And there was those 3-point contest and dunk contest were pretty big deals back then. And Larry Bird famously walked into the locker room and looked around at all of his peers, the other 30 best basketball players in the world. And he goes, all right, well, 3-point contest tonight. Which one of you guys is finishing second? And then Larry the Legend went out there and won the 3-point contest. So, another year of pick'em. Which one of you guys is finishing second? I'm sorry. All right. I'm sorry. I feel like Tiger Woods out here. I'm just pacing the field. All right. Just try and keep up.
I will say, hey, credit where credit's due. With 14 teams, it's not quite, it's difficult. It's difficult.
It's tougher now.
You nailed it. It's like I said, you had to pick one of the three that pulled a shutout, and three's unusual anyway.
I will say it feels like Schuyler and I are at a little bit of advantage in these early weeks because you can just kind of look at, all right, who's playing the FCS schools or, the G5 schools and kind of go from there. But I guess you guys can do the same thing too.
Yeah, I was going to say last year was different. Like Owen and I had to pick a player. We changed the rules to team.
Right.
Like Owen said,
right.
If you told me Oklahoma was going to beat Arkansas State 73-0, I would have picked them as the rushing champion of the league. Right.
Dude, I couldn't believe it. I was like, these dudes absolutely slayed it in the air. And I'm thinking to myself, no, they're going to run all over this team. That's what you get. I guess I'm sitting at the bottom of the barrel.
Boys, like we said, week one of college football is Forrest Gump. Box of chocolates, never know what you're going to get. Just try and hang around, right? And don't lose the plot there week one. So there's where we're at. 1 week down in the books. Still plenty to go here. That leaderboard could certainly change. I could be eating my words by the time we get to the end of this thing, but we will keep you posted, obviously, week by week here as we roll along. We got to get to a break here. We come back on the other side. We'll make our week 2 picks as we look ahead to another big full slate of Big 12 football. Wesley Euler, Jed Drenning, and Owen Schmidt, you are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Let's go, Mountaineer fans. You're tuned in to In the Gun with Wes, the Runaway Beer Truck, and the Signal Caller.
Back in the gun here, as it is time to make some week 2 picks here as we look around the slate of Big 12 games. We'll start with Owen here on this one. Owen, to remind you guys once again, the Runaway Beer Truck, which team in the Big 12 is going to rush for the most yards here on the ground in week 2. Big O, where are you going, partner?
It is what it is, boys. I'm taking our Mountaineers, baby. Let's go.
I think that's a good pick. Duquesne, obviously, a team in the Mountaineers. It's probably going to try and play it close to the vest and run the football and, get some touchdown drives and comfortable lead and keep the defense fresh and all those different things. Big O stays right at home and goes Mountaineers to rush for the most yards in the conference here in week 2, of course, hosting Duquesne 6:00 on Saturday night. Jed, the signal caller himself, he tells us which Big 12 offense is going to throw for the most yards in these week 2 slate of games. Jedger, where are you going?
TCU's got Nickel State. I bailed out of that pretty quickly. I thought about Dana and the Fighting Houston Cougars at Rice. they weren't the high flying Danas of old. They found different ways to beat UTSA last week. Texas is on the road to Bama. I mean, I think they might have some production, but come on, I'm not doing that. I tinkered with Texas Tech at home against Oregon under the lights. That was tempting because I could see that maybe being a high flying, high scoring game, and in which they'll be in a trail position. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean towards Oklahoma for the second week in a row to have production through the air. Owen talked about what they did last week. Now, I almost didn't do it because they were so dominant in the air against Arkansas State. But guys, they only threw 33 times against Arkansas State. What's crazy is they were 30 for 33. They had a backup quarterback in Jackson Arnold who was 11 for 11. Now, say what you want. I did not expect Arkansas State to be that overmatched. So I think part of that might be the continued maturation of Dylan Gabriel in that offense, the Jeff Lebby offense. And so I'm expecting some decent things out of Oklahoma against SMU. They face SMU again. I mean, this is the same SMU team that a year ago gave up over 5 bills against Dana and the Houston Cougars through the air. So I think that Oklahoma is going to find a way to play some pitch and catch. They had 5 guys over 50 yards receiving in that blowout win over Arkansas State. So I think they might be hitting their stride through the air. Of course, they'll have a balanced attack, but I do think that SMU might score just enough to allow Oklahoma to keep putting it in the air to separate before they put the game away. So I'm going to go with the Sooners.
Always a well-educated pick when you take the Oklahoma Sooners to do well on offense. With the exception of last year, that's something that we've seen an awful lot of. Certainly saw it week 1 and could continue this week. Before I get to my defense of the week, our guy Schuyler Callahan, right? Host here on the podcast, occasional host, all-time producer here of In the Gun, if you will, for our guy Sky. He is staying right at home as well, too, like Big O. He's going with WVU as his Big 12 offense of the week to score the most points against those Duquesne Dukes, Pittsburgh's foremost collegiate athletic program there in Duquesne. Of course, can't really think of anybody else that would be in the conversation as they make that's the backyard brawl, right? I think that's what they call that between that Pittsburgh athletic program. And Schuyler taking the Mountaineers as well, too. So we've got WVU from Owen and Schuyler. We've got Oklahoma from Jed. I'm going to use a little Jed logic on this one. I think Jed alluded to this a little bit earlier, talked about how, you want to talk about a team that's got to be stewing right now, a team that ran into a bit of a buzzsaw and something they didn't expect week 1, TCU, right? Getting shellacked in the national championship game, right? 63-7, I think was the final score, right, Jed? 65. I know you talked about that on our previous episode of ITG. And then you come back home against this Colorado kind of darlings of college football right now in a way, and they end up taking it to you. I mean, it's a close game. It comes down to the wire, but they end up beating you at your own stadium when you were a multiple touchdown favorite. They got to be stewing at TCU right now. They've lost their last 2 games. I know one dates back to last year, but both, you could say in embarrassing fashion, right? You get blown out. Just boat raced by Georgia in the national championship game. And then this Colorado team with a brand new roster, with a brand new coaching staff who won 1 game last season, comes into your stadium and beats you to open the year as multiple touchdown underdogs. I got to think TCU's ticked off. I got to think they're looking around and saying, all right, we got to get this bad taste out of our mouth. These, from the way last season ended to the way this season has started. And they're at home on Saturday night against the mighty power Nichols Colonials out of the Southland Conference, who lost their first game of the season to Sacramento State. So we laugh about this and we do. It's like the Duquesne thing, right? Like, I don't want to poo-poo Duquesne. They've got a lot of athletes and coaches who take it very seriously and are dedicated and work hard and all these things. But we know what college football is. In some of these games, you get a huge gap between teams. And Nichols against TCU is one of those. It's a night game at Ammon Carter Stadium again, so they'll be jacked up and ready to go. And like I said, I think looking to get a bad taste out of their mouth against a 0-1 already Nichols Colonials team. So I will go with TCU. Slight edge, because I was thinking about picking WVU as well, too. But I'll go TCU for my Big 12 defense of the week.
Wes, you think that this offense from Nicholls State that mustered 24 points against Sacramento State isn't going to be quite as – I actually played in a past life dating myself. I played in the late 80s at Nicholls State in Thibodaux, Louisiana.
I should have known you
Terry
did.
and Jimbo at Sanford. But I want to get one final number. Schuyler, text me as we speak because I want you to be a part of this too, just for entertainment purposes, because we have to. You have the Cy-Hawk Bowl, Iowa State. I want to get a total number of points in that game. Everybody's guess for total number of points in that game. I'll go first. I'm going to say 30 total points scored between the two teams. Who wants to go next?
27.5. Oh, wait, sorry. This isn't Iowa State's locker room, and we're talking about gambling lines here. 27, pardon me.
Card culture. 27 for Wes.
Okay. I will go with.
Is he going to price us right us again here?
I'm pricing. I'm doing it. Jed, you picked 30.
30.
I'm going to go 36.
Whoa, 36. Now, bear in mind, wasn't
Might be a
last
couple
year
block
score in
punts
the
in there.
Cy-Hawk Bowl 10-7 shootout, I believe, which was very typical of the Cy-Hawk Bowl. Well, okay, here comes Schuyler. He must have known last year's score. Schuyler comes in. His total point pick is 23 points.
I love it.
23 points. We'll revisit this next week and see who came closest. 36 for Owen. Oh, why do you go 35?
I should have went 31, but I didn't know. I don't know. I'm thinking it's going to be different.
Okay.
We shall see. We shall see. Oh man, it's always a lot of always a lot of fun here to do these pick'ems. Yes, Iowa State. Say that again. What's the name? The Cy-Hawk Bowl, right?
The Cy-Hawk Bowl. The Cyclones and the Hawkeyes.
The Hawkeyes. Yes. The Steelers versus USC knockoff jerseys bowl maybe there in Iowa as well too. So there's our picks for the week. For our Big 12 pick'em. Let us know what you think in the comments. Get involved. You can give us your picks if you want to as well. Keep track of how you're doing throughout the season, but we'll obviously continue to keep you guys updated. Big week here on the podcast. Tomorrow we're going to have our Phil Thursdays. Phil Steele, great reception on the first episode there with just one of the absolute czars, the mayor of college football. If Paul Feinbaum is the mouth of the South, Phil Steele is the knowledge of the North. I just made that up on the spot. We're going to roll with it.
I like it.
So Phil Steele every Thursday, this Thursday and every Thursday on the podcast will always be a lot of fun to hear from him. And obviously on Friday, our full preview of that Duquesne tilt coming at you as well too. So folks, we got our new format this season. We got an episode dropping for you almost every single day throughout the week, 4 episodes every single week to get you ready for the Mountaineers each and every game day and all those days in between. But that'll do it for us today. Thanks to our guy Schuyler for putting this together as always for us. Reminder about our podcast feeds. You want to be subscribed wherever you get your podcast. Doesn't matter if it's Apple, Google, Spotify, Spreaker, Clipper, all these different platforms, Audible, whatever it might be. We have 2 podcast feeds right now. There's one that has our traditional In the Gun logo, like the one that I'm wearing on my t-shirt right now if you're watching on YouTube. And then there's the one with Owen hurdling that poor soul from Rutgers as well, too. You want to subscribe to the feed that has Owen hurdling Rutgers, okay? That's the Believe feed. That's the one that's going to exist in perpetuity. Eventually, our crossing streams here will get corrected. We're grandfathering everybody in, giving you time. But I know we're kind of beating this dead horse, but we want to make sure you guys are getting all the content that we're putting out there. So make sure you're subscribed to the right podcast feed as well, too. It's the one that we put out in all of our social media links as well, so you can find it there in all of our social media posts. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube and checking out all the great graphics and the production that Schuyler's doing for us and Jed's helping put together with the numbers and everything as well, too. That will do it for us on this edition of ITG, but like I said, still 2 more episodes to go this week, so plenty coming at you. For Jed Drenning and Owen Schmidt, the one thing that we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wesley Euler. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. You've been In the Gun.